stop the world.
It's very important to explain to the Australian people what we need our Defence Forces to do, why we need them to do that, why we're funding them in the way that we are, and why we're organising in the way that we are.
Welcome back to Stop the World, ASPI's new podcast on international affairs and security. I'm Olivia Nelson.
And I'm Steph Tiller.
It's been a busy week in the defence world, with the release of the highly anticipated National Defence Strategy and Integrated Investment Programme.
These two major documents were launched by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, during a speech in Canberra this week. Increased funding was announced, an extra $5.7 billion over the next 4 years, and defence spending will increase to around 2.4% of GDP by 2033 to 2034.
During his speech, the Deputy PM said that the centre of strategic policy is defence funding. History will judge us not by what we say, but by what we do. And you can only do if you properly fund.
So what is a National Defence Strategy and Integrated Investment Program, and why do we need them?
In this episode, ASPI Senior Analyst Euan Graham speaks to retired Major General Andrew Bottrell, who was previously the head of Land Systems at Defence, alongside ASPI's Director of Defence Strategy and National Security, Bec Shrimpton.
They discuss their immediate response to the NDS and IIP and explore some of the challenges that might lie ahead.
The real pressure is on the heads of those acquisition organisations to make them more agile and to actually be able to deliver.
They also examine the different solutions that are proposed to address workforce challenges facing the Defence Force, which was the focus of a recent ASPI report, Regional Security and Pacific Partnerships.
Our report and this idea of recruitment of foreign nationals is just one part of that picture. We need to be thinking about how we use technology differently.
So two major documents and a lot to unpack. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
Hello, you're listening to Stop the World, the ASPI podcast. I'm Euan Graham, Senior Analyst. Joining me on the podcast today to discuss two newly dropped defence policy documents, the National Defence Strategy and the Integrated Investment Programme, are Andrew Bottrell, recently of the Department of Defence and formerly Australian Army, and my boss, Bec Shrimpton, who heads the Defence and Strategy side of ASPI. Bec, I might start with you. The National Defence Strategy was mandated under the Defence Strategic Review, so it's no surprise. Could you just tell us a little bit about what it's meant to do as both an internal and external facing document? How is it different from a Defence Strategic Review and the documents that preceded that, the Defence Strategic Update in 2020 and before that, the Defence White Paper? So why have we ended up with the NDS in its current form?
It's a really good place to start, Euan, and thank you for that question. Defence strategy documents are traditionally designed to provide an explanation of what matters to a country, why we need to organise around particular threats or challenges, what that sort of threat and challenge environment looks like, what it means for spending on defence. So there's a really important relationship here between strategy, the what we need to do and the why we need to do it, the capability, which is sort of the how, and the means of actually bringing all of that together, which is the money, the budget. So this dynamic relationship, which is neither linear nor perfectly kind of cyclical, between strategy, capability, and budget, are three elements that we really need to see in a strategy document. It's very important to explain to the Australian people what we need our Defence Forces to do, why we need them to do that, why we're funding them in the way that we are, and why we're organising in the way that we are. And that's exactly what white papers have traditionally done in the past, and they've been intended to be done on something of a 4-year cycle, but that didn't really hold. We went sometimes as long as 10 years without a defence white paper. The strategic environment has very much driven that sort of longer time frame planning process to a stronger, closer one. So when the new government came in, rather than do a new defence white paper, it directed a defence strategic review. And the purpose of that defence strategic review was to have a look at the environment and say, do we have the defence force that is fit for purpose for the environment today and into the future? What that dictated or directed was that we needed actually a stronger cadence to our planning process. That the environment was changing rapidly, it was deteriorating, so we needed a 2-year process, informed by a net assessment, so a very strong comprehensive assessment process to develop a plan and communicate that plan to the Australian people, and to inform the structure of our Defence Force. So now we're on a 2-year cycle. We get a net assessment informing a plan, informing a force design. I think that's the real essence of what this document is designed to do and supposed to do.
Thanks, that's really clear. So let's take it forward then in your judgment. How successful is the new National Defence Strategy in taking forward the DSR? What's your overall impressions? Where is it hit the mark and where does it fall short?
So for me, this does align, and it takes many of the concepts which were admittedly very well developed in the DSR itself, and it re-articulates and it re-emphasises them. So there's continuity certainly between the Defence Strategic Review and this National Defence Strategy. That said, the strategy goes to a lot of trouble to couple itself with the Integrated Investment Program. And Andrew is going to be talking to that. He's better placed to talk to that. But we really need to keep in mind that these are two documents that need to be read together. The NDS itself, the strategy itself, tells us to do that. The National Strategic Review, or the Defence Strategic Review, talked to a national defence approach. It talked to a need to transform the forces, and that was very strong in Minister Miles's, the Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Miles's speech to the National Press Club yesterday. He's talking about a transformational change. What we're actually seeing in this document looks more like reform than transformation to me, and it really is an evolution maybe, but it's not a dramatic evolution. It is a building out of what was a very thorough document in the Defence Strategic Review to start with. I think the key document and where a lot of the really interesting stuff lies for us to analyse is actually in the Integrated Investment Program itself.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's bring
Euan. I can just add something there. And thanks for the invitation. I didn't expect to be invited to be a commentator on defence so soon after having left. But if my comments can help anyone to understand and interpret some of the detail, then I'm happy to provide that commentary. Of course, I'm only a couple of weeks out of defence, so I'm still very much in that mindset. I liken my immediate reaction to the NDS was a little bit like having seen Hamilton for the second time. Loved it the first time, was blown away by it, but the second time it wasn't as impactful. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. The Defence Strategic Review, I think that was incredibly robust, and I think it was probably the most impactful change in our strategic thinking since DOA, Defence of Australia, the white paper in 1987. So I think that may be part of the issue. And Beck, you mentioned the DSR. I think that might actually be part of it here. So I have a view that the DSR was incredibly robust, and the things it called out, the big questions and the big criticisms that came after that was it resourced? And now what we're seeing, this is now I suppose the opportunity for government and defence to actually show how the DSR and that DSR articulated into a strategy, albeit with the criticisms, I think the valid criticisms that Beck just mentioned, but the The IIP has, I think, coherence with the DSR in terms of what it's trying to do. So in that regard, I actually think it's that the IIP is pretty bold. It's bold in the impact that it will have on existing projects. It is mammoth, and to the extent that I was able to, I was trying to advise industry that, hey, listen, you need to be prepared for the impacts that that are likely to come out of the flow through of the DSR implications and the recut of the IP. That will now, there will be lots of criticism of that, but the Defence Minister yesterday said he was prepared to do that, and I think that was bold of him to be able to say that. It needs continuity for this to flow through and for the IIP to be implemented, to be set, and to follow through. And my sense is that the Deputy Prime Minister wants to remain in that role to provide that continuity that has been missing in the defence space for a significant period of time. So I suppose I'm coloured by the perspective that I come from, but I'm reasonably buoyant. There are lots of risks in here, of course, but that's almost an aspect of physics. How much can you do now versus the future? And so, yes, it promises a lot more outside the forward estimates, but part of that is physics, and there is clearly risk that's being called out in that space.
Let's jump in on some of the specifics. I want to focus on funding, first of all, something that the Defence Minister himself put particular emphasis on, saying, judge us not by what we say, by what we do. But foremost in that was the commitment of funding. And the case he made was that the government is committed an additional 5.7 billion over the next 4 years, an extra 50 billion over the next 10 years, which will then achieve a doubling of defence expenditure. Is that sufficiently quick, Andrew? Start with your impression, to deliver the capability that Australia needs on the crawl, walk, run. How fast are we tracking?
Yeah. Look, and I think when it comes back to the point I was just starting to make earlier, that we're talking, I think it's 5.7 billion to the out to the forward estimate, so that's out to 27, 28 of that $50.3 billion increase, which will be the increase over the decade. Yeah, around just over 10% of that will be is planned to be expended inside the forward estimates. So there is clearly some risk there, but I think it's been, and I have to be a little careful here, that's it's been done because that's where defence and its understanding of industry can actually deliver inside that period. So there's no point trying to front end load that if it's inconceivable to be able to deliver that. So there is an amount of physics in there in terms of the capacity. So, but therein lies the very risk that we I think are all aware of here. How do you deliver meaningful, focused, and integrated capability as quickly as possible? It all comes down to the understandable focus on what is the technology that's being acquired, and how quickly can it be acquired, and making the process robust and fast is the key. And I think the pressure on the acquisition organisations will rightfully only increase. So, and it's up to the leadership of those organisations to get the processes right. You heard the Deputy Prime Minister yesterday say that he was prepared to stand up and take criticism for early failure, but failing fast. We talk about it, and we talk about changing the risk frame. I think we're all looking to see what that actually looks like. So there's a huge amount of pressure on on the leaders of the acquisition organisations, on CASG particularly, on the NSSG, and clearly on the submarine agency as well.
Beck, obviously the Defence Department can't deliver everything, and there is a particular pressure on delivery of submarine and naval frontline capability. What, in your estimate, are the trade-offs where the cuts are falling, and is it a fair criticism of the IIP and the NDS that it hasn't so much buried the axe as hidden it in the weeds? Are we finding out that where is capability likely to suffer? There's already been some speculation around naval support vessels, mine countermeasures, missile defence, and space capability, which I know is close to your own heart. What's your read on the opportunity costs of the investment outlined yesterday?
It's a really good and it's a really important question to answer. I don't think we have all the information that we need as yet, but the story yet to be told does indeed lurk in the cancellations, the divestments, the delays, and the rescoping. Look, I do want to go back just quickly to what Andrew said earlier. Look, I accept the Deputy Prime Minister's assertion that they're injecting real money here. $5.7 billion additional funding over the forwards is real. It is real money. I also accept that to get to where you want to go, you've got to start where you are. To get to this fit for purpose force that the DSR has directed and that this document, this National Defence Strategy re-articulates, it's actually going to take time. That said, there is the capability gap that many people are talking about, and this concern, given the rhetoric of the deteriorating environment, the need to spend money quickly. And this is where I think there are some doubts and some risks about our abilities to access and get into service commercial capabilities that probably do represent the answer to some of these issues, to some of these capability questions, while we wait for the transformation of the ADF to happen. The trade-offs, you do need to make them, and some of them will be sensible. We know, or we think, for example, that we're not going to go to the full 100 F-35s. That on its surface does make sense. Changes in technology probably indicate that investments in smaller, uncrewed, many and smart can really give you a lot more bang for your buck. And can complement those exquisite capabilities in really nice, interesting ways, and allow for human-machine teaming concepts that are all just emerging and are really important for us to start sort of playing with. That said, the implications around and the intersection between that decision and others is where I'm still looking to build out my understanding of these two documents. So again, on the surface, we're starting to see, and you can start to imagine what this 10 years down the track fit for purpose force looks like. But when you have an integrated force and you have a focus force and you are making trade-offs, the relationship between those forces and moving from that sort of service focus to the integrated focus, you're going to find holes, you're going to find problems, you're going to be assuming things are going to talk to each other and network in ways that perhaps they're not. So for me, the really interesting bit will be there's conversation about how, hey, you're seeing things like integrated battle networks, missile defense capabilities, for example. You're not seeing them in one bucket called missile defense. You're going to see those capabilities spread across a number of platforms. That's what an integrated force looks like. But again, until we really, really build out this picture of the future force and understand exactly where all of these key capabilities and these enablers lie, it's going to be pretty hard to tell where the holes are and where the holes remain. And I think it is concerning that we might be just looking for a lot of easy wins and big money without understanding the implications of those trade-offs.
And Beck, I wonder whether that's where there's I think a sizable proportion of funding that's been set aside for ASCA to try to get after that mix of technology, some of that low end technology or some of that new technology that could be fielded quickly. Some at the high end, some at the low end. Some are in large platforms. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's a combination. And so I actually thought the allocation of additional funding for ASCA to be able to get after some of that stuff, to try to lift it, and then it's about how do we industrialize that and bring that to bear. Some of what you were just saying that I think is the key, but it's not one or the other. It's a combination of all of them. Much of the focus here is about these big platforms, which, yes, big platforms are going to take time to get into the program and deliver. So, I think they're trying to build that low end, fast delivered technology in there as well. But therein lies part of the risk as well.
Andrew, can you explain what ASCA is?
And just to,
Oh, sorry, my apologies. It's the Australian Strategic Capabilities Accelerator. So, sits inside the Defence Science and Technology Group. Emily Hilda is the relatively new lead for that, and it's designed. We've effectively brought together the previous organisations that were fostering ideas from industry that could assist with defence capability. It's the intent here is to give it greater focus, specifically against the requirements of the National Defence Strategy and linked to the IIP, so that it's not trying to be all things to all people. So it won't fund as many areas of research as it perhaps or as it might have previously done, but it will be more focused, so that when it does focus on something, there will hopefully be greater chance of its success coming through to be delivered as part of the capability, or alternatively, it fails fast, so that it's looked at, considered, put aside, and redirected those resources elsewhere.
Beck, you wanted to say something?
I do. I want to just jump in and offer a slightly different view. The Australian Strategic Capabilities Accelerator. Accelerator is right there in the title. Yeah, it's funded. Yes, it's been created. It's not exactly the promise that the government took to the election, to be fair, which was far more around research and development and looked a little bit more like an advanced research and project agency than an accelerator. That said, we do need an accelerator. That's clear. The DSR has made that clear, and the strategy makes that clear. The funding slice of the pie, when you look at the chart that Defence provides, even in the IIP, I think it's 1% of the capability spend. Arguably, when we're saying we're not going to get what we need for a while, we need time to work out this mix of capabilities, and I completely support Andrew. We need time to work out what these new technologies mean, how they work together with the more exquisite. How do you actually, start to wrestle with operational concepts that are genuinely new? Are we really giving ASCA enough? And in terms of the again, really clearly articulated need to embrace risk, this fail fast, it's a wonderful thing to say. But we really need to see this actually happen. We've seen 2 challenges so far, the second only recently. Electronic warfare, autonomous systems and robotics was the first. What capability is in service yet from either of those? We have to see words turn into action. We have to see these capabilities in service, being used, being played with. Some probably are, but maybe we're not talking about it enough. But again, in the DPM's own words, right now, what we have to judge is moving from strategies, which are words on paper, program plans, which are words on paper, into actually seeing this stuff delivered. And so far, we haven't seen a lot delivered. And I think ASCA needs more money. Sorry, one more issue. We have a bit of a problem when we have embedded the organisation that we are asking to take on risk inside a traditionally risk-averse bureaucracy that gets grilled at Senate estimates and has very little room for risk. In reality, it's a big ask of those.
Look, I agree. Look, your points are entirely valid. I'm an optimist by nature, so I have, and there are some brilliant people working inside ASCA and DSTG, and the secretary's given them really clear direction in terms of their focus. So look, I remain hopeful that it will continue to grow into the Australian version of a world leading capability delivery agency in that sort of new technology space. I do see the impacts, and one of the points I wanted to make, Euan, the reprioritisation of the resources. It is a massive leadership challenge for defence and for industry, and there's going to be a lot of small to medium enterprises out there who are going to be hurting. And so we're talking about $22.5 billion worth of projects reprioritised over the next 4 years, and about $72.8 billion over the decade. I've got a list here of about $40 billion worth of reprioritisation, which an industry colleague had sent me. And it talks to Land 400 Phase 3, about up to $10 billion reallocated from that. The acquisition of the 2 joint support ships, about $5 billion from that project being closed. Maritime mine countermeasures and the military survey capability, about $4 billion from that. And the list goes on. Most of these are big projects, but they have a supply chain and they have industry that is linked to that. And there's going to be an awfully significant impact from cancellations, from delays, and rescoping and divesting. And we haven't even spoken about the estate piece, which is a massive one that the department will spend a huge amount of time trying to get that right. But there is, in all of those, there are impacts for industry. And I feel personally for particularly the smaller companies that are out there, trying to work out where do they fit in amongst this and trying to get clarity. And that will start to flow now that the IIP has been released and the authorities for those agencies to then go out and engage with industry to let industry know what is happening with that body of work. Sorry, that's being delayed, that's being cancelled. And there is a cost to that cancellation and a cost to that delay as well. So there will be significant implications from this. The Deputy Prime Minister acknowledged it yesterday, but it's going to be a significant one.
Really important to get that industrial perspective. Andrew, I just want to take the focus back to the service, inter-service element. How do you think this, the IIP, will land with the service chiefs? Obviously, this is about an integrated joint force, but the rub, if you look at the graph in the IIP, clearly indicates a prioritization of naval platforms, in particular the undersea warfare capability associated with AUKUS and Collins extension will be part of that, getting 17% of the pie and 16% of the pie going for localized sea control and sea denial. And that's not the only part of the naval procurement list. So is that fully priced in? Do you think the reality is that we are moving towards a skewed priority list for the obvious strategic reason?
Well, look, I think the IIP, the way it looks now, I actually think it's true to the DSR, and so my sense of the capability percentages against those, they seem to make sense. Are there implications for the services? Yes. I mean, Army's been through a significant restructuring, and when you look at the view of Army and what it took into the Defence Strategic Review, I actually think, apart from the very big obvious one, the infantry fighting vehicles and Land 400 Phase 3, Army's actually come out of this with pretty much everything that they push for, and their advice going into the Defence Strategic Review, I think, has been reflected in the recommendations from the DSR and in the National Defence Strategy. So I don't think Army. I think Army people assume that Army's the big loser out of this. Army has been reformed, and I think the Chief of Army Simon Stewart has done a power of work very quickly to reshape Army to be able to support the National Defence Strategy. So I don't think they're pretty collegiate, the senior leadership, and they've looked at the strategy, and government's made decisions. They've all looked at how do we add to the delivery of this strategy. Clearly, the maritime force is where that emphasis is going. That and guided weapons, starting with the previous government, starting to ask very hard questions about what was our ability to be able to survive and in a mid or high intensity conflict. And I think those questions were really well asked. To this government's credit, it took them some time to look at that, and then to go even deeper, and to convene the Defence Strategic Review. And I think that has validated some of those hard questions that were asked by the previous government, and it's been doubled down on it. And that's why they've ended up with the IIP, which I do think is true to the DSR and the National Defence Strategy.
Beck, I want to turn to you on workforce issues, which were singled out for a separate plan that will go forward, and also just to flag that one of the things the media has picked up on out of the DSR is opening up the possibility of recruitment of foreign recruitment into the ADF. That's a subject that you wrote on recently, in particular connection to the Pacific Islands. What are your thoughts about the workforce challenges, and do you think the DSR addresses those? Sorry, the NDS addresses those.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thanks for the plug for the recent ASPI report on recruitment, particularly with that focus on the Pacific Island community. There is absolutely no doubt, and the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned this yesterday, workforce is a huge issue. It's rightly a focus of both the strategy here and of funding, which is important. That said, this is a really challenging area, and it's challenging because we're in there's a global war on talent. This is not just an ADF issue. This is not just about making working for defence more attractive. For many, actually, it is. It is about making it easier. It is about potentially making it more rewarding. It is about potentially having impacts on families, lessened. We have to think very creatively to solutions to the workforce problems. Our report and this idea of recruitment of foreign nationals is just one part of that picture. We need to be thinking about how we use technology differently, how we really focus on the core tasks that must be done by people in uniform versus what can be done by others. We need to think about the use of the reserves. We need to think about how we can move people in and out of the civil sector and defence. So get some two-way kind of movement. A lot more of that might be really, really useful and helpful in achieving capability, if not, direct personnel numbers. So, this is a complicated issue. It's given good time in the strategy, and I think it is actually given, in the leadership changes and the organisational changes in defence, the signs here are quite promising. But again, it's a real challenge, and it is not one that is unique to defence. Frankly, it's unique. It's shared by the nation, and it's actually a global phenomenon.
Finally, I'd just like both of you to focus on one thing that you thought the two documents did well, and one thing that you think they underperformed on. And if I'm going to hand you a scorecard out of 10, where would you rate the two documents? Andrew, over to you first.
Right. Look, on if I was to give a scorecard, look, I think I'd come back to my point about most of the NDS big issues were covered from the DSR. So I don't know. I'd probably give that a 6, first effort, not bad. The IIP, I think the IIP is incredibly bold. Yes, I can hear some commentators screaming at us about it's too, at all of us, Australia, that we're not moving, we're not thinking about this fast enough. I think it's bold in terms of the reprioritisation of focus and the willingness to make significant decisions on changes now. Is it too late? Yes, of course, we'd like to have been doing this a decade ago. That's probably the greatest criticism, but you have to start somewhere. So, huge accolades for being bold. The greatest criticism is, yes, we still need to fix that agility and that risk frame. And I think there's enough attention on that. And that's why I say I think the real pressure is on the heads of those acquisition organisations to make them more agile and to actually be able to deliver. So I think, for the IIP, I'd probably give it a 9 because it is big, it is bold. Is it too slow? Well, that's a matter of physics.
Beck, a 6 and a 9. Any variation on the scorecard from your perspective?
This is where I'm going to stop being divergent and be completely convergent. I totally agree. As a couple of as a pair, I'm gonna go the 6. For the NDS, it's a 6. I agree. Look, I think what they did well was set out the vision, consistent with the DSR, and that consistency is important. The relationship between capability, strategy, capability, and budget is reinforced again in these documents. I too, though, particularly thought the IIP provided a much more coherent and comprehensive and compelling story about what we're going to do. And I know the NDS, explicitly referenced that and said, hey, look to the IIP for the plan. Strategy without a plan is nothing. Here's the plan. Can't be all of the plan. There's actually more to this than the IIP. That's just the capability. And I do share Andrew's the comment on risk that 90% of the spend remains unapproved and pushed beyond the forwards. One last thing I would say is we are still in the phase of words. The hard work, the implementation is yet to come. So again, let's absolutely hold the DPM to his own standard that he wants to be held to. Let's see what they do here now that we've got these strategies and these programs.
Euan, one last comment from me, if I may. And I meant to mention it when Beck was talking about the NDS at the very beginning. The other piece that the NDS does do is, apart from messaging to Australia, it messages to other nations, it messages to our allies, it messages to the region, and it messages to those who might threaten Australia's interests. So I actually think in that sense it's clearly useful to be transparent and to be able to explain why we are doing what we're doing. I think that's the other utility of the NDS.
Fantastic. Andrew Bottrell and Beck Shrimpton, thank you for giving us such a robust, very quick take, given that the documents are both lengthy and only were released yesterday. We'll look forward to your commentary in future. Thank you for joining the ASPI podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks, Euan.
That's all we have for you this week on Stop the World. If you have any feedback on the new podcast, we'd love to hear from you at podcast@aspi.org.au.
And be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.